Chapter 15, On the Banks of the Delaware. Philadelphia is a world in itself, Uncle Phineas told Benjamin the next morning, and it is thine and Grimalkin's to explore. Listen sharp, lad. My shop is on Wynn Street. Pennypot Inn is hard by the river Delaware. The market is on High Street. Commit that to memory, and thee will never get lost. Neither the cat nor the boy got beyond the river Delaware. In the whole county of Chester, Grimalkin had never seen rats so monstrous and lively. As for Benjamin, his eyes flew over the harbor. Now he knew why Jacob Ditzler wanted to come back to Philadelphia when he was man-grown. Here were things to see. Ships building, riverboats and ships of the sea, single-masted sloops, two-masted brigs, ships that carried 100 ton. As they made their way down to the waterfront, Benjamin spied a string of rawhide lying discarded in front of a warehouse. Suddenly he had an idea. He picked up the string and quickly made it into a cat's collar with a long lead. Now he could explore the wharves without fear of losing Grimalkin. Together, they visited all of the sail lofts. They saw apprentice boys sitting on low stools, mending sails with great long needles. They saw boys twisting hemp into ship's ropes. Without stopping their work, the boys eyed Grimalkin curiously. Benjamin studied every face. Somewhere among the young apprentices, he hoped to find the eager round face of Jacob Ditzler. But not one among the boys even resembled him. Perhaps, thought Benjamin, he is among the sailors loading or unloading the ships. Together the boy and the cat trudged to the full length of the wharf, but most of the sailors they saw were grown men. Benjamin inquired at every warehouse, too, but no one had heard of a boy named Jacob Ditzler. By midday, Benjamin was tired and discouraged. He shared a piece of journey cake with Grimalkin. Then they both curled up in the shelter of a long wooden shed and dozed in the sun. Just as they were falling into a deep sleep, they woke with a start. Steeple bells were clanging. Guns were saluting. And from all the red houses up and down the hillsides, people came running. "What is it?" asked Benjamin of a lad who almost stumbled over Benjamin's feet. The boy was running so fast he could not stop. "The antelope packet," he called over his shoulder. "She's almost ready to dock." Benjamin scooped Grimalkin into his arms and raced in the direction of Wynn Street. "Uncle, uncle," he cried as he burst into Uncle Phineas's shop. "The city has come alive. I need a paint box." A slow smile spread over Uncle Phineas's face. He reached far back on a shelf and produced a clean canvas and a paint box, exactly like the one he had sent to Benjamin. The bells were still clanging. The guns were still saluting as Benjamin set up his canvas on the banks of the Delaware. Grimalkin patted and sniffed the cakes of paint. Then he settled down at Benjamin's feet and blinked up as if to say, "This seems almost like home. Now I can take a real snooze." Sailors from Spain and Portugal, from New England and Old England, from the West Indies and the Azores, gathered around Benjamin. Few spoke the same language, but they all understood the picture that took shape before their eyes. A shining river going out to sea. Men fishing on the banks. A ship in the harbor. And a white cow eyeing the water. Perhaps Benjamin would not have painted so easily had he seen the scarlet chariot of Samuel Shoemaker draw up behind him. Samuel Shoemaker was known throughout the colonies as a big merchant. If Uncle Phineas had 5 boxes of salt in his warehouse, Samuel Shoemaker had 20 and 5. If Uncle Phineas had 10 rolls each of calico and cambric, Samuel Shoemaker had 10 times 10, and silks and velvets besides. After handing the reins to a slave, Samuel Shoemaker threaded his way through the crowd of sailors and tapped Benjamin on the shoulder with his gold-headed cane. Benjamin looked around in surprise. He had never seen a man quite like this before. His face was as plain as a salt box, but his wig and his clothes were wonderful to behold. His wig was tied to resemble pigeons' wings at the sides, and he wore a purple waistcoat with a cascade of white ruffles that reminded Benjamin of the waterfall in Grevling's picture. "Lad, who are you?" asked Samuel Shoemaker, his eyes on the canvas rather than on Benjamin. "Why, I am Benjamin West, son of John West," replied Benjamin, in a voice so like Papa's that Benjamin scarcely knew it for his own. "I come from Door Latch Inn in the township of Springfield in the county of Chester." The man threw back his head and laughed so vigorously that the powder from his wig rose like a white fog. "Egad," he whistled, "you must be Pennington's nephew. I am Samuel Shoemaker." "Thee knows my Uncle Phineas?" asked Benjamin. "La, yes, here's the proof." And right there on the banks of the Delaware, with all the sailors tapping their feet to the tune, the great Samuel Shoemaker recited, "I eat my peas with honey. I've done it all my life. It makes the peas taste funny, but it keeps them on my knife." When the foot tapping and the laughter died away, Mr. Shoemaker said, "I have just ordered a picture from the artist William Williams. I am on my way to his lodgings now, and should be glad of your company." "But I have a cat." Mr. Shoemaker looked down at Grimalkin, who was now sniffing his shoe buckles. "A mannerly cat is welcome anywhere," he nodded. "Why, that is what Mamma says, her very words," smiled Benjamin, as he handed Mr. Shoemaker his paint box. Carrying his picture very carefully in one arm and Grimalkin in the other, Benjamin climbed into the chariot while the sailors thumped one another on the back and grinned at his good fortune. William Williams was a little cricket of a man who had gone to sea in his youth. He lived in a small studio with hardly any furniture, but to Benjamin it was the most beautiful room he had ever seen. Canvases lined the walls, and from them pink flamingo birds and ship's captains and parrots and white-wigged ladies and gentlemen looked down with a superior air. It was almost as if they could smell the turnips and cabbages cooking in the rooms below. To Benjamin, however, no room had ever smelled more exciting. He sifted out the familiar cooking odors and breathed in the good smell of paints and oils. Mr. Shoemaker seemed in a hurry to leave. He introduced Benjamin and Grimalkin, asked where his picture would be delivered, then turned to go. "I'll leave you two artists alone," he said with a wink. "You'll have much to talk about." But when the door was closed, Benjamin seemed to be struck dumb. He wanted to ask a million questions, yet he could think of none. At last William Williams thought of a question. "What books," said he, "have you read?" "Why, I've read the Bible. I've read about John and Thomas and Samuel and Joseph. My brothers were named for them." "I mean books on the art of painting," said Mr. Williams with a slow smile. "Oh," gulped Benjamin in surprise, "are there books on painting?" For answer, Mr. Williams reached up on his chimney shelf and took down two sizable volumes. They were bound in brown leather that had the nice look of an old saddle. There was a kind of worship in the way Mr. Williams held them. "These two authors are Richardson and de Fresnoy. They were my teachers," he said, as he looked down at Benjamin. "Now they can be yours, too." And he laid the books in Benjamin's hands. Just then Grimalkin began to mew hungrily. "Yo-ho!" laughed Mr. Williams. "Here is a cat that wants his dinner. Now it so happens that a lady who is sitting for her portrait just brought me a whortleberry pie and a crock of fresh milk. I'll heat the pie to make it juicy and toothsome. Meanwhile, we can speak about your picture." Benjamin had eaten nothing but dried journey cake since breakfast. His mouth watered at the thought of hot whortleberry pie, but no sooner had Mr. Williams left the room than his appetite was gone. He wished he could hide the picture. 100 doubts began pricking at his mind. Were the colors too bright? Did the cow stand out too sharply? He had about decided to snatch up his picture and cat and run down the flight of stairs, when Mr. Williams returned with the pie and a basin of milk for Grimalkin. All the while that he set the milk on the floor and placed the pie in the warming oven at the side of the chimney, he had one eye on Benjamin's picture. Benjamin stole a sly glance at his face. It was as blank as a wig rest. He listened for some word of criticism. None came. Instead, Mr. Williams reached for the tongs hanging at the side of the mantel, took a live ember from the fire, then slowly lighted his pipe. And just when Benjamin could bear the silence no longer, Mr. Williams spoke. Even then Benjamin could not tell how he felt, for all he said was, "Will you leave your picture with me, lad? I want to show it to Dr. Smith of the Academy."